You're listening to the Homeownership podcast by Momentum Realty, real estate talk for buying, selling, and owning property.
Hey guys, Sean Patrick Maloney here, broker owner of Momentum Realty, located in Hanover, Massachusetts. Welcome to episode 24. Should you hire a professional or do it yourself? I'm your host, Sean Patrick Maloney. Thanks for joining us this week. This is one of the more common questions when people are getting ready to sell a home, also when they're owning a home, sometimes even when they're buying a home and they're planning their budget, but it's, should you hire somebody to do the job or should you do it yourself? I'm going to break down a whole bunch of different classifications of work and talk about the differences between. Of course, different people are going to have different scopes of availability and knowledge of what they can actually do themselves, but keep in mind that there's nothing worse than doing a project wrong and paying somebody to do it again after. And that's actually one of the more common things when it comes to do it yourself. And I'm sure we're all laughing inside ourselves thinking about the time we bought something from IKEA, never set it up, and then ended up buying the actual piece of furniture. So let's start with landscaping. Landscaping is one of the more common ones where I say do it yourself. There's a lot of things in the landscape world where you can do it yourself. Everything from overseeding the lawn to trimming the shrubs to putting down the mulch and planting plants. But the reality is, not always is it as simple as looking at whether you can technically do a project or not. Sometimes it's as simple as whether you have time or not, and also how much money you make an hour and whether it's actually worth your time, or maybe you should spend a few more hours at work, make more money than it actually costs to have done, and have it done better. At the end of the day, no matter what type of work you're talking about, a professional can always do a better job. So out of landscaping, I just mentioned trimming the shrubs. Trimming the shrubs is something where, yeah, any of us can do it, but what are they going to look like? And if your house is about to go for sale, then maybe it's not the best idea to trim your own shrubs because you might not have great symmetry and shapes. But if you're trying to save some money because you're a homeowner and you own a bunch of shrubs and you're just looking to get it done, that might be a great time to do it yourself. Or if you're looking to buy a property and it's got those massively overgrown bushes, you might even be saying to yourself, should I trim them or should I completely rip them out? So that might actually take having someone come in for an opinion, or you might be knowing yourself, okay, I can rent a machine and do it. But remember, if you're just going to go ripping shrubs out around the foundation, you better be careful because the next thing you know, you could end up with water in your basement, or you could crack the foundation by pulling something where the roots have grown into the foundation or grown underneath the staircase, or they have roots going underneath the walkways and you pull them and the next thing you know, now you have a collapsing walkway or a collapsing staircase where you just had a few bushes. So one of the things you always want to remember when it comes to landscaping is do things within your own scope. Obviously, you can mow your own lawn, weed whack, you can put down mulch, you can plant flowers. But when it comes to should you be mowing your lawn, again, we come into the category of if you have a million things to do, such as moving, and you have to get everything ready, you're going to do some painting inside and all that stuff, sometimes you want to delegate the cheapest jobs. So when you're thinking about all the different jobs in the household, whether it be painting, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, roof, all these different things, some more technical, some less technical, one of the things you can look at when you're thinking about which ones should you hire out at is what ones take the most amount of time but cost the least amount of money to hire out at. Because if you can hire people for cheap and you can go do those more important jobs such as like packing your items, well, maybe that makes more sense. Or maybe it makes no sense for you to pack your items because you're severely technical along the lines of working on the home, and maybe you should hire a moving company to come in and take care of those goods. So again, that's where it's kind of situationally based of what is best for you to make the decision. But always when you're looking at the projects, you want to look at time in versus dollars vested. Let's talk about the next subject. So plumbing. Plumbing is one where I say hire in. It's way too common and easy to say, oh, water only flows downhill and all these different quick little things that we have for like ideas of how plumbing goes. But the reality is if you get plumbing wrong, you have a big disaster, especially if you're doing plumbing on the second floor and you have an issue. Now you have water coming through the ceilings and you went from $5 down at the depot for a pipe and a little bit of pipe glue, and now you have the reality of now you need ceilings and lights and electrical and you have mold issues and all these things. So with plumbing, I always hire in because at the end of the day, it's something that is a licensed trade and the person really actually knows what they're doing. I know a lot of people discredit different trades because they say, oh, it's just easy, but reality is it's the real deal. And the number one when you're doing plumbing is never do your own plumbing on gas. Make sure you always hire in when you're doing natural gas plumbing because that is a really important one to get right. You don't get that one right and we don't even need to explain what's going to happen. Things go bad really quickly. So let's talk about electrical. Electrical is another licensed one. With electrical, maybe you hang your own new lamp, maybe you hang a new ceiling fan, but don't get too cocky, don't overdo it. Make sure when you are working electrical, you know what you're doing. Make sure the main is always off. Make sure that you have no power throughout the house, not just the switch off, but the main down in the basement. There is no power throughout the entire home before you're ever working on it. I think we've all seen an old style commercial where the wife comes in, the husband's doing a little electrical work, and she tries to flip the lights on and he gets knocked off the ladder. They used to play those little jokes sometimes with the different insurance companies and asking if you're properly insured and asking if you're hiring the right professionals for the job. Might even have been an Angie's List commercial as well that played that. But the reality is electrical is very dangerous. You can burn your house down, you could really hurt yourself. And again, it's a licensed job. People go to school for it. People end up in unions and different groups like that where they actually are apprentices for a long time. So don't think that it's something where, hiring them in is a bad idea. Like I said, it's very easy to go and buy a new sconce for the front light on the house and replace that. It's just 3 wires, but make sure. If you're going to play with something that can kill you, you know what you're doing with it, because it ultimately can kill you and it ultimately could burn the house down. So I would say hire in on that one all day long. And again, you're going to have a million projects as a homeowner or as a home seller or buyer. You're going to have a lot of projects coming up. So hiring out for the licensed jobs just kind of makes sense, because why not get over and take care of that landscaping work, or why not get over there and do a little bit of the painting and things like that? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff to do. So just think about it. If it's licensed, maybe I should hire out. Next one down along the line that comes up often is things to do with the roof and gutters. Quite often we have overflowing gutters on homes, and we have roofs that need cleaning or roofs that need a little bit of replacement, maybe a single shingle blew off or things like this. I'm always going to say do it yourself on that one. But if you're afraid of heights, you don't own a ladder, or you're just haphazard in your behavior, you do not want to be up on a roof. This is another one where you could get really, really hurt. Cleaning your gutters can go from a simple day of just reaching in the hole, grabbing out a handful of leaves, putting them in a bag, and climbing down the ladder. But if you don't own a ladder to reach a 28-foot roof costs roughly $300, and it costs about $150 to have your gutters cleaned. So unless you're cleaning your gutters for the next long time, if you're just up for sale, you're looking to get certain jobs delegated, you can cut out basically a half day, maybe a full day worth of work and the expense of renting or buying a ladder, and you can have someone take care of it. If you're buying a home, you're going to be there long term, might be the time to buy that 28-foot ladder the first year for $300, and then year after year after year saving $150 to $200 and just doing it when you do your fall cleanup and do your spring cleanup. That way there, you don't even have to bring a bag up with you. You can just reach in, pick the stuff out of the gutters, throw it down to the ground, and at the end, rake and clean it up. Because one of the more hazardous things to do when you're up there cleaning the gutters is carrying a bag or a bucket up and down with you the whole time. And then the worst thing to do is sit on the roof and lean forward and pick the gutters. I know it's a lot easier in people's minds, but the reality is your center of gravity is way off, and when you reach forward, if you ever slip and go, you're going to go right down. I know people are nervous about ladders, but the reality is if you got a person holding the bottom and you're there and you're on a flat ground and you're secure, you're more safe on the ladder than you are on the roof. And if you are going to go on the roof, just like the roofing professionals, you should use a harness with some ropes, and you should have a secure point, so that way there, if you do slip, you don't go right off the roof. I personally used to work in a company where we used to clean roofs off of snow and everything. One of the days was actually pretty funny. We went up the roof and everyone's shoveling. I went over the other side to shovel, and I came back up the ladder, and the guy's like, how'd you come back up the ladder? Well, I left the roof. I went right off the backside. Thank God there was a lot of snow. I stepped on the other side to shovel it off, and an avalanche happened. It took all the snow off the roof and me off the roof. So when I said to him, I said, hey, you guys should speed up a little bit. I've been down there for a while. Go look at my side. It's done. And they went and looked, and they're like, oh my God. And I was like, yeah, actually the snow took me off the roof. So I say it jokingly because I could have really got hurt. I got lucky. It was a year where we had a lot of snow. But the reality is when you're on a roof, if you ever make a wrong step and there isn't snow or something soft on the ground, chances are you're going to end up in the hospital. And when you're going to buy, sell, or you're going to live in your house, it's never a good time to be in the hospital. Especially when you're trying to sell a home. Now you can't move yourself. Now you can't do a lot of the physical work. So I'd say hire in when you're working on it and you're not going to be there full time, but do it yourself when you have the availability of buying the ladder. make sure you take your husband, wife, friend, or whatever and have a second person there when you are in those situations so that God forbid something does happen, they're there to make sure that you can get proper help, but also they're there to hold that ladder and make sure that you're safe in doing so. Now let's talk about painting. Painting is one of the ones where I say do it yourself all the time, but at the end of the day, you need to know what you're capable of. And if you're not capable of doing a good job, painting is something where you can make a miserable mess, and then you can spend a fortune having someone come sand it all back down, get it ready, scrape it, and then paint again. And the other thing that can happen with painting is if you're a sloppy painter and you have rugs in a house, then you're going to end up with paint all over the rugs, and the rugs are going to get ruined. That makes no sense. So if you're going to be painting, you want to think about everything. You want to think about how you're doing it. You want to do a lot of prep work. You want to make sure you're sanding things down like a professional would. And you want to make sure that you're clean about your work. Make sure you keep a wet rag there with you. That way if something falls onto the carpet or onto the hardwood floors, you're cleaning it up right away. And make sure that you know what you're doing with the painting as far as you're not painting for you. You're painting for the person buying the home. Unless you are a homeowner looking to paint, then maybe you're painting your own colors. But one of the things I want to remind you is it takes a lot of work to paint. So if you're painting in a color that you don't think you're going to be able to sell it with, then you need to think to yourself, am I willing to paint this wall twice? So this is something I want to bring up to you, because if you paint the wall fuchsia and you decide that's a great color for you, but you know you're only going to be there for 3 years, are you prepared to end up painting it with 3 or 4 coats of paint because of the fact that you chose such an extreme paint color, and now when you go for sale you're going to have to paint it again to a more neutral, maybe a gray or any other color that is common with the buyers now, light blues and other things like that. So it's a good idea to think about, and always remember that when you are painting, either do a good job or don't do it at all as far as doing it yourself. Painters can come in. The one thing that I always say about doing it yourself is you can go buy a gallon of paint and a couple brushes for anywhere between $40 and $100 to do a room. And right now, painters usually demand somewhere in the $50 to $100 an hour range, and every given room takes between 8 and 12 hours to paint. So you're talking about a cost of $400 or $500 per room instead of less than $100 a room. So paint is one way you can really save a lot of money, and actually it can be a lot of fun. You know, when you're customizing and you're painting your own thing, it can actually be a real good time because it's like immediately gratifying work. As you run the paintbrush down the wall, the old color goes away, and by the time you finish, the room looks like a new place, and ultimately it can bring in a whole new look and go from a dark room to a light room. Suddenly the room can feel a lot bigger. All those different things can go on. So again, do it yourself when you can, but hire in if you need to when you're selling. Doing the exterior painting is probably a good time to hire in. Exterior painting takes expertise not only just in painting, but the prep work. And if you're just going to paint over old wood that has problems, it's not going to change anything. So make sure you hire a painter in. And that's why I run into the next one, which is carpentry. When you're painting the exterior of a home, sometimes you run into rotten corner boards, rotten fascia boards, and all the other boards. Sometimes we say to ourselves, I could just run up to the depot, pick up a board, and throw it in. Reality is, do you have all the tools you need? Carpentry tools can be quite expensive. Circular saws, table saws, sanders, all the different things you need, hammers and all that. They actually can run quite a bit of money. And if you're going to go down to the depot and you're going to have them cut the board and you're going to hang it up, just hire someone in, because it's not going to work out. You know, I always say the old joke, I measured it once, cut it 3 times, and it's still too short. What that means is, you can't really mess up on woodwork, because if you do, you can't glue it back together to make it longer, and usually the materials are actually quite expensive. So with carpentry, I usually suggest hiring in on that. If it's something as simple as, rehanging a screen door or different things like that, maybe you feel technical enough. But again, this goes back to knowing yourself and knowing your technical level and your level of expertise, because if you're spending a lot of money on stock, the last thing you want to do is go and mess that good stock up and then have to hire somebody and buy that same stock again. That way they can put it in correctly. With carpentry, a lot of times the other thing is there's a lot of hazards involved. Running a saw and things like that, if you're not familiar with them, can be quite dangerous. So you want to make sure that if you are running a saw and things like that, you know what you're doing. Or if you have somebody that you know, friend, family, that may be able to come over and give you a hand, this can be a place where you can save some money. But ultimately, carpentry is something that most carpenters have been doing for a very long time, and they know what they're doing. And at the end of the day, shoddy work sticks out. So if you're going to be selling the place and you're doing the work and you do some real shoddy new staircase or something, or you hang a handrail that looks terrible, it's not going to show as well. It's not going to get the max money for you. So when you're selling a house, I would always say hire the carpenter. And again, we always refer back to what do we have for technical skills and how much work do we have to do. And if you're selling a home, chances are you have a ton to do. So why be the carpenter? Why not hire the carpenter? Why not be the mover or some of these other jobs where most of the work is just physical and there's really not that much brain involved? It's more so just actually taking the time to do it. So get out there and take care of that landscape and those moving jobs and the rest of the things that you need to do. Next one down that makes a major change to a house, but not enough people do it when they're about to sell, is sealing the driveway. This is a pretty easy one to do yourself, but again, you need to make sure you're going to be willing to do a good job and that the weather's right. This is one that's very weather dependent. You can't just seal your driveway when it just rained, and you definitely don't want to seal your driveway on too hot of a day because both of those options lead to peeling and bubbling and cracking. Driveway sealing companies are fairly cheap and inexpensive, but you also can go up to the Depot or Lowe's and grab buckets of sealer, and you can buy buckets of the crack filler, go back, and in a couple hours you can make your driveway look like new again. This is something ultimately that'll cost somewhere in the realm of $100 to $1,000 depending on the size of your driveway, and totally change the curb appeal of the home. Landscaping helps with that, but driveway sealing is something a lot of people look at because driveways are actually really expensive, usually somewhere $5,000 to $20,000 to have a driveway paved. So when you have a nice paved driveway, to spend $100 to $1,000 that you should do every 5 to 10 years depending on how much use the driveway is getting and depending on what type of sealer you're buying. Some of the sealers you can buy, say 10 or 20 year. I would suggest buying something that says 5 or 10 year because the reality is none of them stay for 20 years. So don't spend the money on the extra one. Buy the 10 year and plan on doing it more often. When you do hire in a professional company, just make sure they know what they're doing and make sure you ask them how thick the coat is that they're going to put on, because some of them basically come spray paint your driveway and it really doesn't make any difference except for the driveway's a darker color black versus it being sealed. And also make sure that when they give you a price that they're including the crack sealer. The crack sealer is going to make a big difference in people's minds as far as the fact that when you're crack sealing, they know it's not going to go further versus when you're just spray painting basically the driveway black and you're not putting on a thick coat, it's really not making much of a difference. Next one down I want to talk about is the air conditioning and heating system. We can all do it ourselves when it comes to changing a filter, and I highly suggest changing your filters on the regular. It's a general maintenance item for your heating system or air conditioning system that's going to make a world of difference. And when it comes to when you're going to sell a home, one of the first things that home inspector is going to do when he goes by the AC and heating system is he's going to pull that filter. And if he pulls it out and it's filthy, he's going to say this person is not taking care of the system. And this is something that some of them are even as simple as rinsing out some of the newer ones, or as cheap as $5 or $10 a filter. The other thing is this will knock down the allergens in the house, but it'll make it run cooler, it'll make it run hotter, and it'll make it run quieter. So you want to make sure you're doing that all the time, especially when you're going to be up for sale. But naturally, usually what they say is every 30 to 60 days, depending on the filter type, you want to be either making a change or rinsing it out. AC and heat is also something that when you're going to be going up for sale, I always suggest having a service company come out before and hanging a service tag on the unit. I've gone through lots and lots of home inspections, and I can tell you that the home inspectors love when they see those little tags hanging on there that says it was recently inspected by this company and updated with these features, because that tells them I don't got to look too heavy into it. And also, if you're going to do that, maybe find out what year the heating system and AC was made. That way there you have the answers for the buyer that they're looking for. But on AC and heat, I would say do it yourself on the filters, but everything else hire out. Once you're heating and air conditioning professional, that's a job where you want the pros to come out. You spent a lot of money, anywhere between 10 and 20 grand on the system. It's certainly worth a couple $100 to have someone come out and service it. And I would say have them service it annually. That way you know that you're being taken care of. The other thing you can do is buy a service plan. Most of these companies sell a service plan where they come out annually. A lot of times if you're buying oil through them, they actually give you a discount on it. But make sure you take care of your systems. Ultimately, the one thing I want you to get from this podcast is it's important to take care of your home. Whether you're buying it right now or you're getting ready to sell it, I can guarantee you that maintenance will save you money or earn you money. It'll save you money in broken systems, and when it comes time to sell the house, it'll earn you extra money because all the buyers will want your house because it's well maintained. When you're thinking about hiring or doing it yourself, look at your skills, look at your expertise, look at the time, look at the costs, analyze whether it makes sense for you, and have fun doing it. If any job's no fun to you to do, then think about hiring out so it gets done right. Thanks for listening this week. I really appreciate you tuning into the podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to me through DM, PM, email, or anything else that works for you. I look forward to talking to you next week, and thanks so much again for joining us.